It all started on a red-eye flight out of LAX. One of those overnights where the whole plane seemed drenched in weariness, passengers slouched into silence, hoping for just a few uninterrupted hours of sleep. I'd boarded late, last minute. As usual, still wearing my blazer from the boardroom and the scent of cold coffee and tension. The week had been brutal. 3 deals, 2 lawsuits, and a media interview that went viral for all the wrong reasons. I wanted nothing more than silence. I hadn't slept in almost 36 hours, so when the toddler in 12C started wailing before we even pushed back from the gate, I could feel the pressure in my temples crack like glass. A high-pitched, soul-shaking cry, not the kind that fades into background noise, the kind that drills into your skull and anchors your heartbeat to its rhythm. I shifted in my seat, eyes half closed, trying to drown it out with a podcast. No luck. The crying didn't just continue, it crescendoed. It was frantic, primal, and for some reason unlike any I could rationalize, I unbuckled my seatbelt, turned, and looked toward the sound. A woman, early 30s, frazzled but composed, in the way only desperate mothers can be, was bouncing the child on her hip, apologizing to the aisle, fumbling for a bottle, her hair pulled into a messy knot, eyes filled with that unique cocktail of embarrassment and helplessness. That should have been the end of it. I should have sighed, leaned back, and let the flight attendants handle it. But I stood. I walked the few rows forward like someone was calling me. "Need a hand?" I asked, my voice lower than I meant it to be. She looked up, startled. Up close, she looked even more familiar, though I couldn't quite place her. "I'm fine," she said quickly, bouncing the child again, though her arms were visibly shaking. The toddler, red-faced, slick with tears, turned his head toward me, mid-wail. And then he stopped, just like that. I don't know what I expected, but it wasn't silence. The boy stared at me, blinking through tears, hiccuping as his little chest heaved. I knelt to eye level without thinking. "Hey, buddy," I whispered, not knowing why I was speaking to him like I knew him. "Tough night?" He reached toward me. Before she could stop him, the kid had grabbed onto my tie, tugged himself against my chest, and nestled his tear-streaked face against my shoulder. And I froze. I hadn't held a child, let alone been this close to one, since I was a kid myself. But this moment felt hauntingly right. His little fingers clutched the lapel of my jacket. I instinctively wrapped an arm around his back. He exhaled against my collarbone, letting out a tiny, quivering breath. And that's when I saw it. Just beneath the collar of his onesie, barely visible in the cabin's soft light, a tiny, crescent-shaped birthmark, dark brown, almost black, on the left side of his neck. A mark I'd seen before, 6 years ago. My pulse kicked up, sharp and immediate. My breath caught. No, it couldn't be. That night was a memory, a shadow from another life. A mistake I never fully processed, buried under mergers and meetings and time. But I remembered her, the hotel bar, the storm outside, her laugh, her name, Marissa. My eyes flicked up to the woman's face, studying the curve of her nose, the slope of her cheekbones, the tilt of her chin. Oh my God, it was her. And the child in my arms, the one who looked too much like me to be coincidence, was mine. I blinked rapidly, blood roaring in my ears. I wanted to speak, to ask, but I couldn't. The toddler snuggled closer, soothed into sleep by the beat of my heart, one that was pounding loud enough to shatter glass. The woman, Marissa, unmistakably, was watching me now, stiff as stone, her mouth slightly parted. Her eyes were wide, searching mine, seeing the recognition flicker there. I didn't say a word, neither did she. Instead, I carried the boy back to their row. She followed, silent. We settled him between us, still asleep, his tiny hand gripping my pinky like it had always belonged there. "So, before you get comfortable," Take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me in the comments, what city are you watching from, and what time is it where you are? Now, let me tell you how everything I thought I knew shattered somewhere over the Rockies, and how a crying toddler rewrote my entire life. He stirred slightly beside me. The toddler, his head nestled into the crook of my arm, like he'd done it 100 times before. I couldn't stop staring. My body felt frozen, but my mind was racing at 1,000 miles an hour. Every breath he took synced up with mine, every tiny snore like a tremor under my ribs. The cabin had finally quieted. Most passengers, lulled by engine hum and dimmed lights, were asleep or halfway there, but not me. I couldn't have slept if I tried. My eyes kept tracing that faint crescent birthmark, peeking out every time his head shifted slightly. That, same shape, same spot. The memory was unmistakable. Years ago, 6. I remembered her brushing her damp hair back, her neckline open as she leaned over me, that exact mark visible just beneath her shoulder. I remembered touching it, teasing her about it, her laughing, saying, "Maybe if I ever have a kid, they'll get the same moon print." It had seemed innocent, forgettable. Now here it was, on the neck of the boy sleeping beside me, a boy with a face I couldn't deny. The resemblance was too much. His eyes, hazel with that strange gold ring in the right one, same as mine, the same double cowlick, even the way his bottom lip pouted slightly when he was asleep. I used to do that as a kid. My mother told me once, said I looked like I was always halfway through a secret. I swallowed hard. "Do you want him back?" I asked quietly. Marissa's hands were in her lap, clenched so tight her knuckles were bone white. She shook her head slowly, never meeting my gaze. "He's comfortable." A long silence. "What's his name?" I asked. That finally got her to look at me. Her mouth opened, then closed. For a moment I thought she wouldn't answer, but then, soft, resigned, she said, "Theo, Theo." The sound of it hit me harder than I expected. "Theo." I whispered it once, barely audible, and the toddler shifted again as if responding. "My son." "No, no. Don't jump there. Don't assume. It's not confirmed." But something in me already knew. There are things blood recognizes before logic can intervene. I felt it in my bones, in the way his tiny body seemed to sync with mine. How natural, how right it felt to hold him, like I'd done it every day in a life I somehow missed. Living. Marissa turned her gaze forward, staring straight ahead, like the seat back in front of her was a screen, playing a movie only she could see. She didn't speak again. Not for the rest of the flight. But I watched her. She looked exhausted. Not just tired, drained. Her posture was perfect in that way Mom's master. Shoulders back, jaw set, every inch of her signaling composure, while her eyes betrayed something much deeper. Worry, guilt, fear. And then it hit me. This wasn't just about the child. This was about what she knew I was beginning to suspect. Did she know I'd recognize him? Had she expected this? She must have. You don't name your child Theo and not remember the man you left behind, especially not when that man's name is Theodore Charles Langston, my full name. The implications pressed on me like cabin pressure during descent. Why hadn't she told me? Why had she disappeared? I wanted to ask. But Theo stirred again, and the moment passed. So instead, I studied him, the tiny hands, the soft curls, the way he furrowed his brow in his sleep, the same way I did when I dreamed about deadlines. I found myself gently stroking his back, tracing tiny circles as if my hands had always known how to comfort him. It was terrifying how natural it felt. Business school never prepared me for this. No boardroom negotiation, no IPO strategy, no billion-dollar acquisition. Nothing had ever made me feel so unsure of myself, and yet nothing had ever felt more important. For the rest of the flight, I barely moved. Even when my legs cramped, even when my foot went numb, I just sat there holding him, my mind rewriting the last 6 years with every breath he took. What had I missed? His first words, his first steps, his first fever, his first scraped knee, his first giggle? My throat tightened. The tears didn't come, but they hovered just beneath the surface, waiting, and the woman beside me, the one I barely knew, yet suddenly knew more intimately than most people in my life. She never looked at me again, but I felt her watching, out of the corner of her eye, not with malice, not even with shame, but with caution, like a woman sitting beside a lit match, unsure if it would warm her or burn the whole thing down. The flight wore on like a stretched-out silence, the kind that buzzed in your ears even when no one was speaking. Cabin lights dimmed. The air grew colder. Theo was still asleep, curled into my side like I was the only safe place in the world. I didn't know what to do with that. I didn't know how to be that. Marissa hadn't spoken again since she said his name. She just sat there, her face turned slightly toward the window, pretending to watch the clouds, though we were flying through nothing but blackness. But I knew better. I could see the way her fingers twitched in her lap, picking at the edge of her sweater sleeve, the way her chest rose with shallow, deliberate breaths, trying to keep the emotions locked down tight. I stared at her profile, and suddenly I was transported back. 6 years ago, the hotel lobby in Boston, a leadership summit. She was seated at the far end of the bar with a half glass of wine and a quiet smile that didn't ask for attention, but drew mine anyway. I'd approached her casually, more curious than anything. No plans, no games. We talked for hours. About nothing, about everything, about places we'd never been and books we never finished. She told me her name, Marissa Grant. She was in marketing, consulting for a boutique firm, smart, witty, quick to roll her eyes but slow to judge. I liked her. I remember thinking that, in the middle of a week stuffed with ego and small talk, she was like a breath of something clean. We shared a room that night. One night, that's all it was supposed to be. She left before sunrise, and I never saw her again. I'd looked for her, briefly and half-heartedly, after the conference. Asked the hotel if she was still checked in. No luck. Searched her name, found nothing solid. In time, I chalked it up to a moment. A spark. One of those things that burned hot and quick and left behind nothing but warmth and a twinge of regret. And now here she was. Not in a memory, not in a story I tell myself on lonely nights, but in row 11, seat B, with a boy beside her who bore my face like it was printed in his DNA. "Why didn't you tell me?" I finally asked, voice barely, above a whisper. She didn't answer at first. Then, "This isn't the time." "When then? We're trapped in the sky." She sighed and for the first time turned to fully face me. I tried. The words hit like a brick. I blinked. "What?" She looked tired. And not just physically. There was history behind her. Eyes now. I did try, Theo. I tensed when she used my name. Not because it startled me, but because of how gently she said it. Like it wasn't a weapon, like it had weight. "I sent a message," she continued, 3 weeks after I found out I was pregnant. I wasn't even sure you'd remember me, but I thought, maybe. I still had your card. I shook my head. Slowly. I never got anything. Her eyes dropped to Theo, still asleep, unaware of the conversation his existence had set in motion. "I figured as much," she said quietly. "Your email bounced back. I called the office line and some woman picked up, said you were traveling, asked what it was about. I panicked and hung up. 2 days later, I sent a letter to your company. I stared at her, numb. Letter, email, phone call. I hadn't seen any of them. Then again, back then, I had an assistant who handled everything. Screened calls, sorted. Emails, filtered letters. Angela, ruthless, efficient, protective to a fault. I could see her now, skimming that letter, seeing a hint of scandal, and deciding it wasn't worth my time. I never asked what she threw away. I trusted her to filter the noise. But this wasn't noise. I rubbed a hand down my face. "Oh, my God. I took it as a sign," she said, "that you didn't want to know, that you'd moved on, that I needed to too. Jesus, Marissa, if I had known. I didn't want a confrontation," she cut in, her voice suddenly sharper. "I didn't want money. I made a decision. I told myself I'd raise him alone. I didn't want to turn his life into some boardroom negotiation." The words stung, but I didn't argue, because part of me knew exactly why she'd think that. The headlines, the suits, the constant travel. My face on magazines under cold titles, Langston's Law, the relentless rise, no room for family. Would I have been ready then? Hell, I didn't know if I was ready now. I looked down at the boy who slept against me, my son. The word felt foreign. I'd built an empire, bought companies, restructured entire industries. But this was a life I didn't even know I'd started. And now here he was, breathing slow and even, safe in my arms. "Why now?" I asked, softly. "Why this flight? Why are you here?" "We were visiting my sister in LA, she said. "Just flying home." "Home is Chicago." I nodded, letting that sink in. Chicago. Not that far from me, really. A whole life. Just one time zone away. "I don't want to fight," I said after a long pause. "I'm not trying to start one," she replied. I don't even know what I'm supposed to feel right now." She nodded slowly. "Imagine how I've felt for 6 years." Silence again, not angry, just full. Theo stirred, tiny fingers twitching. He opened his eyes for a second, squinting, looking up at me with that same gold-ringed stare. And for the first time, he smiled. Not a big smile, just a hint, a little. Corner lift, but it was real. He saw me, and in that moment, nothing else existed. Not the plane, not the past, not even the pain. Just his smile, my heartbeat, and the terrifying, beautiful truth sitting between us. Theo shifted in my lap, pressing his tiny hand flat against my chest, like he was checking to see if my heart was still beating. God, it was. Loudly, thunderously. Every thump echoed through me like I'd been cracked open and something ancient and new was trying to get out. I didn't know how to hold a child. Not really. But my arms weren't asking questions. They were acting like they knew exactly what to do. Like they'd been waiting for this moment longer than I had. Marissa watched me. I could feel her gaze like the warm side of a flame, not quite touching, but close enough to feel. "He's never fallen asleep on a stranger," she said. Her voice was almost too soft to hear. "Not even family." I didn't say anything. I couldn't. The lump in my throat was swelling like a knot in a frayed rope. She looked down. "I guess he doesn't see you as a stranger." And that's when the pain crept in. Quiet, deliberate. I was a stranger to Theo, to this whole other world that had kept spinning without me. There were birthdays I'd missed, lullabies, first colds, temper tantrums, bedtime stories. I hadn't even known to care, and still, it gutted me. The weight of that time, those missed years, settled in my chest like stone. "How old is he?" I asked, though I already suspected. 5. Turned 5 in April. I nodded. Did the math. That Boston trip had been in early August. 6 years back, right before my first major acquisition, right before my life began accelerating like a bullet train. I remembered that week. Not because of her, if I'm being honest. Not at the time, but because it was the moment everything I touched seemed to turn to gold. My name started showing up on magazine covers, and the weight of success pressed into my spine like a trophy I didn't know I was dragging. But now, that whole timeline bent under the shadow of this moment. "What does he know?" I asked. "About me?" Marissa exhaled slowly. "Nothing. I didn't tell him anything. Not even my name. I told him his daddy lives far, A way that he's busy and that someday maybe he'd meet him. I nodded slowly. Somehow that hurt more than I expected. Not because she kept him from me, but because she'd left the door open, left hope lingering, soft and quiet. She hadn't poisoned the well. She'd preserved a space for me, even when I didn't know it existed. I looked at her again. "You didn't have to do that." "Yes, I did," she said, and her voice broke on the words. "I had to believe I wasn't doing the wrong thing every single day." Theo stirred again, murmured something I couldn't quite catch. Then he reached up, sleepy and squinting, and touched my jaw with his small, warm hand. "Daddy." The word hit like a wave, crushed, pulled, swallowed, reshaped. I choked on my own breath. Marissa's hand went to her mouth instinctively, eyes wide with a panic that looked almost maternal and guilty at the same time. "I never taught him that," she whispered, as if trying to explain something impossible. "He's never said that word before." But it didn't matter. He said it. Daddy. And he said it while looking at me, not with hesitation, not with confusion, with certainty. He knew. Somehow, he knew. I couldn't speak. My mouth went dry and my eyes blurred before I realized they had. I blinked furiously, trying to stay composed, but the ache behind my ribs swelled like a dam about to break. I'd been called a lot of things in my life: CEO, visionary, shark, powerhouse, but never daddy. Not once. "Hey, buddy," I whispered, voice thick and trembling. "Yeah, I'm here." He smiled again, and that simple expression, so small, so pure, undid something inside me. He curled back into my chest like he didn't need an answer, didn't care what my title was, didn't know, or ask what I had or hadn't done right. He just wanted warmth, presence, a heartbeat close to his own. I held him tighter, letting the silence wrap around us, and somewhere miles above the ground, something shifted, something I couldn't undo. This wasn't just a meeting, not anymore. This was a revelation. I had a son. I didn't know what to do with that, but for the first time in years, I wanted to learn. And just as I was about to say something to Marissa, just as the questions were forming again, the captain's voice crackled overhead. "Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be beginning our initial descent into O'Hare shortly." Theo stirred again, but didn't wake. Marissa straightened, brushing a hand down her jeans, eyes flicking away quickly like she needed to rebuild the wall between us before we landed. I knew that look. It was the look of a woman preparing for goodbye. "Wait," I said quietly. She looked up. "Don't just disappear, not again." She hesitated, then after a long moment nodded once. "I wasn't planning to," she said. "Ooh," she said. "Not this time." My shoulders sagged with the breath I hadn't realized I was holding. I turned to the window, watching the pinpricks of Chicago's lights bloom beneath us. The skyline I knew so well. But now it wasn't just the city I was returning to. It was him. The landing gear rumbled beneath us, and the plane dipped slightly, angling toward the glowing grid of Chicago below. Theo was still asleep, nestled into my chest like I was the only home he'd ever known. My arms had started to ache, my legs stiff from holding still so long, but I didn't move. Not even an inch. I couldn't. Not when his tiny fingers were wrapped around my shirt like that. Not when his breath warmed the fabric near my heart. Marissa had grown quiet again, her face turned toward the window, but I could tell she wasn't watching the city. Her eyes weren't on the lights or the skyline. They were somewhere else entirely, probably back in the days when she'd stood alone in a hospital room, holding him for the first time. When the nurses had asked for a father's name and she'd had no answer to give. The plane trembled slightly as it descended through a thin veil of clouds. Passengers stirred. Overhead, bins clattered softly. Someone behind us was snoring. Someone ahead coughed. But inside my seat, it felt like we were in a separate pocket of time. Marissa finally spoke. "He likes dinosaurs and puzzles. He hates peas but loves broccoli. Go figure." I turned slowly to her, startled by the sudden rush of information. He thinks blue is a flavor, not just a color. And he gets nervous around dogs unless they're tiny enough to fit in a purse. He sings in his sleep sometimes, but only when he's had too much sugar or when he's really, really happy. I nodded, overwhelmed. He's afraid of thunder, but not lightning. And he doesn't like it when people yell, not even on TV. He pretends to be brave, but when he's scared, he hides under the dining room table. She stopped, her voice cracking. And when he's sad, she whispered, he asks where you are. I closed my eyes. There were no words for that, none that mattered. I want to be in his life, I said. She looked at me, not with surprise, with something closer to caution. I don't know what that looks like yet, I admitted, and I know it's not up to me alone, but I need to try. She gave a small, nearly invisible nod. I never wanted to keep him from you, Theo. I was scared, and then time just moved on. I get it, I said, surprising even myself. I mean, I don't like it, but I get it. The plane's wheels touched down with a sudden jarring bounce. Theo stirred in my arms, eyes fluttering open. Are we here? He murmured, still half asleep. Yeah, buddy, I said, gently brushing a curl from his forehead. We're here. Marissa reached for him instinctively, but Theo clung tighter to me, shaking his head. No, he mumbled. I want to stay. I looked at her, unsure what to do. She hesitated, then pulled her hands back into her lap. You can carry him, she said softly, if he wants you to. So I did. As the plane taxied to the gate and the overhead lights brightened, I cradled Theo against me, standing slowly to stretch my legs. Other passengers gave polite smiles as we shuffled into the aisle. No one suspected that this moment, quiet, seemingly ordinary, was a collision of lives, a rewriting of fate. We walked up the jet bridge in silence, the cool airport air greeting us like a slap after the warmth of the plane. Theo rubbed his eyes, then buried his face into my shoulder again. He trusted me. Somehow, in a way that bypassed logic or experience, he trusted me, and I didn't know how to carry that. But I carried him anyway. At baggage claim, Marissa finally took him back. He went reluctantly, reaching out for me, even as she whispered soothingly in his ear. I watched them, this mother and son pair I'd never seen before today, yet who felt more like home than anything else in my world. We stood awkwardly near the carousel, watching the belt rotate. He's got preschool, she said finally. 3 days a week, I nodded. And a pediatrician, a dentist. A bedtime routine that involves 3 different stuffed animals and a story about a knight with no sword. I smiled, a real one. I'd like to meet the knight, I said. Marissa hesitated. Then she reached into her purse and pulled out a piece of paper, handwritten, her number and an address. Don't call tonight, she said. Give him a day, let me talk to him. But after that, if you're serious, I'm serious. She held my gaze a moment longer, as if testing it for cracks. Then she gave a tiny nod. Theo was looking up at me, his arms looped lazily around her neck now, thumb in his mouth. I crouched down beside them. Hey, Theo, I said softly. I'll see you soon, okay? He blinked slowly, thumb still in his mouth, but he nodded, then reached out and pressed his tiny hand flat against my chest again, right over my heart. A gesture that said everything he didn't know how to say. I rose, backed away slowly as they turned to leave, watched the 2 of them disappear into the crowd of tired travelers and blinking luggage carts. And just like that, they were gone. But everything had changed. I stood in the middle of the airport, suitcase untouched at my feet, a phone number in my hand, and a new gravity in my chest. I had a son, and I was never going back to who I was. Before this flight, I didn't go straight home. I left O'Hare and drove Nowhere in particular, just turned onto the highway, let the lanes blur past, let the silence in the car stretch longer than it should have. The city fell behind me like a memory. Streetlights passed in slow pulses, glowing like old scars. My phone buzzed with meetings I was missing, emails I should have answered, an assistant's voice in voicemail after voicemail, trying to juggle my carefully curated chaos. I let it all go unanswered, because nothing about today fit inside a calendar. There was no meeting I could take to explain what had shifted inside me. No earnings call to clarify what it meant to hold your son for the first time without ever knowing he existed. The sun was setting now, bleeding amber into the edge of the sky. I pulled off onto a quiet road and parked beneath a grove of trees just outside Evanston. Someplace I'd stopped before, years ago, when I was still building. The company. Back then it had been about clearing my head, visualizing next steps, convincing myself I could climb higher. Now, I just needed to feel something real. The car ticked softly as it cooled. I rolled the window down, let the evening breeze carry in the scent of grass, asphalt, the faint promise of summer rain, and I thought about Theo. How small he'd felt, how right it had felt, and how wrong it was that I'd missed everything until now. I'd spent so much of my life building things, empires, reputations, networks, but I had built them all without a foundation like this, without blood, without love, without something as astonishing and terrifying as a child looking up at you and calling you Daddy. I ran a hand through my hair and rested my forehead against the steering wheel. My chest ached in this strange, unfamiliar way. Not from fear, from something closer to awe. I was responsible for him now. Not legally, yet not practically, not in any way that a courtroom or spreadsheet could measure. But something inside me had locked onto that truth the moment he curled into my arms. He was mine. And that wasn't just biology. It was a bond I felt in my marrow. But here's the thing. They don't tell you about fatherhood, especially the surprise kind. It doesn't come with a manual. It doesn't tap you on the shoulder and ask, "Are you ready?" It throws you into the deep end. And the only choice you have is whether to swim toward him or away. I grabbed my phone, opened my notes app, typed 2 words, "For Theo." Then without even thinking, I started writing. Not a speech, not a plan, a letter to him for someday. "Hey buddy, I'm not great at this part. The explaining, I missed a lot, I didn't know. That's not your fault, and it's not even really your mom's fault. It's just what happened. But now that I know you exist, I don't want to miss anything else. Not birthdays, not school plays, not bedtime stories or scraped knees, or what kind of dinosaur you like best. I want to know all of it, and if you'll let me, I want to be the kind of dad you look up to. Not because I'm perfect, but because I never stopped trying to be better for you." I stopped typing, just stared at the screen until the words blurred. God, what was I doing? I wasn't this guy. I didn't write letters. I didn't sit in parked cars and cry quietly into my steering wheel. But here I was. The phone buzzed in my hand again. My assistant this time. "Sir, just confirming you're missing the dinner with the Japanese delegation. We can reschedule the merger briefing if needed. Are you okay?" I stared at the screen, then powered it off. I wasn't okay, but for the first time, I thought that might be a good thing. Because okay had been cold boardrooms, half smiles, and stiff suits. Okay had been 5 years of not knowing I had a reason to come home to anything real. Now, I had a 5-year-old who thought broccoli was better than peas and knew where to place his hand to calm my heartbeat. That beat couldn't stay on autopilot anymore. It was his now. A pair of headlights swept across the lot, and I realized the stars were starting to show through the windshield. Time was moving. The night wouldn't wait, so I turned the car. Around, not toward downtown, toward home. And not the penthouse in the Loop, not the office that never slept, The real one, the one I didn't even know I needed to find. Because home now had 5 fingers, a crooked smile, and the softest daddy I'd ever heard. The next morning came too fast. I hadn't really slept, just drifted in and out of thoughts that wouldn't settle, replaying every second of the flight on an endless loop. Theo's sleepy eyes, the weight of him in my arms, that one word, Daddy. It echoed through me like a promise and a reckoning. By the time the sun broke, through my windows I was already dressed. Not in my usual tailored suit, just jeans, a plain shirt and a jacket. Something simple, human. I looked at myself in the mirror and barely recognized the man staring back. Less polished, maybe, but more real. I kept reaching for my phone, checking the time, scanning my texts, even opening the camera roll just to look at the blurry shot of Theo and me the flight attendant had taken when she offered to help. I hadn't asked her to, but she snapped it anyway, said something about a moment worth remembering. She had no idea. He was smiling in it, this little half smile with sleep still in his eyes. And I was looking at him like the world had just tilted and I was still trying to find the ground. At 9:17 a.m., I got the text from Marissa. "We're at the park near Montrose Beach, if you want to come by. He asked about you." Just 6 words that stopped my breath. He asked about you. I didn't answer right away, just stood there, phone in hand, heart pounding. Then I grabbed my ease and walked out without thinking. It was almost funny, driving through the city I'd once conquered, my brain full of cartoon dinosaurs and preschool questions. My GPS buzzed with notifications about meetings I should be leading, deals I should be approving. But all I could think about was that little boy in blue sneakers. I pulled up near the park and spotted them right away. Marissa was sitting on a bench under a tree, coffee in hand, watching Theo run circles around a jungle gym shaped like a pirate ship. He had a plastic sword and a towel tied around his neck like a cape. He was in his own world, and it made me smile. I approached slowly, unsure if I should announce myself or just be there. She noticed me first. No wave, just a nod, soft, unreadable. Theo didn't see me yet. He was too busy rescuing imaginary crewmates and climbing the ladder to the ship's deck. Then, suddenly, he turned. He saw me, and everything else stopped. He blinked, like maybe I was part of the game. Then his whole face lit up and he dropped his sword without hesitation and ran straight to me. Daddy! It wasn't shy this time. It was certain, loud, unafraid. I knelt just in time to catch him in my arms. He collided into me like joy itself, and I laughed, actually laughed. This broken, beautiful sound that felt like it belonged to someone else. "Hey, buddy," I said, gripping him tight. "You miss me already?" "Uh-huh," he said into my neck. "Did you bring a sword?" I looked at Marissa, who was trying hard not to smile. I shrugged. "I left it in my other castle." He pulled back, studied me like he was cataloging every detail again. "You can play pirates, I'll be captain. You be the guy who climbs the ropes." "Deal," I said. We played for nearly an hour, me barefoot in the sand, pretending to fall overboard, and Theo rescuing me with dramatic flair. Marissa stayed on the bench, occasionally calling out reminders like, "No throwing sand," or "Take turns." She wasn't hovering, just present. And I kept catching myself watching her, how naturally she mothered him, how patient she was, how she let him be wild and weird and wonderful. I'd been so angry when she told me on the plane, so stunned. But now, here, seeing them together, I understood. She had protected him, not from me necessarily, but from uncertainty, from a revolving door of unanswered questions. And yet, she had left the door open. That mattered. After a while, Theo flopped onto the grass next to me, breathless. "I'm hungry." "Then I'm your guy," I said. "What's the plan? Chicken nuggets, pancakes, ice cream for breakfast?" Marissa raised an eyebrow. "You trying to win him over with sugar and bribes?" I grinned. "It's working, isn't it?" She rolled her eyes but didn't argue. "Okay, fine," she said, standing and brushing sand from her jeans. There's a diner a few blocks up. Theo loves the pancakes shaped like animals. Do they have lions? He asked. Hopefully. They do if you close your eyes and pretend, she said. He grabbed my hand, just like that, like it had always belonged to him. And we walked, the three of us. Down the sidewalk, past sleepy storefronts and dog walkers, the lake breeze tugging. At our clothes, I looked down at our joined hands and felt something shift again. This wasn't just a visit, it was the beginning of something. And I didn't know what it would look like next month or next year. I didn't know how to navigate custody or calendars or telling my board I wouldn't be available every weekend anymore. But I knew this. I wanted to be in his life, in both their lives, not as a guest, as a father. We took a booth near the back of the diner, one of those spots with torn red vinyl and a slightly sticky tabletop. Theo slid in beside me, legs swinging under the table like he was warming up for takeoff. Marissa sat across from us, tucked into the corner with her coffee, watching, always watching. A waitress came over, name tag reading Cora, and she smiled like she'd seen everything and wasn't impressed by much anymore. But when Theo pointed at the menu and said, "I want a lion pancake," she nodded with all the reverence of someone who understood just how sacred a child's imagination was. "Coming right up, Captain," she said. He beamed. I couldn't stop staring at him. He was so comfortable next to me, so unbothered by the fact that just yesterday I'd been a stranger in a window seat. To him, there was no betrayal, no anger, only connection. Maybe it was instinct, maybe it was trust. Whatever it was, it settled deep in my bones like something I hadn't known I needed. Marissa stirred her coffee slowly, not looking at me. "So, what now?" The question was casual, but I could feel the weight behind it. She wasn't asking about the pancakes. I took a breath. "I want to be around as much as you'll let me." She looked up then. "It's not about what I'll let. It's about what he needs and what you're really ready for." "I don't have all the answers," I said, "but I'm not going to disappear. I'm not going to leave him wondering if I care. I'm here, and I'm going to stay." Theo interrupted with a dramatic gasp. "They have chocolate chip pancakes shaped like dinosaurs." Marissa smiled softly. "That's new." I reached for the menu, flipping it over to see for myself. "Okay, now I'm jealous. Can adults order those?" Theo nodded solemnly. "If you believe hard enough," we ordered. Him the lion-shaped pancake with whipped cream main, me the T-Rex with extra syrup, Marissa sticking to toast and eggs. But the real meal was in the quiet moments between. Theo coloring on a placemat with a stubby red crayon, me watching him fill in a sun with green and not correcting him. Marissa's fingers resting lightly on her mug, her expression shifting, softening. When the food arrived, Theo dove in with all the joy of a 5-year-old who had just won the breakfast lottery. He insisted I try a bite of his lion's mane, and I did, even though it was more whipped cream than pancake. I would have eaten 10 of them if it meant hearing him laugh like that again. Midway through breakfast, he looked up at me, mouth full, and said, "Do you have toys at your house?" I blinked. No, not yet. But I can get some." He nodded. "Okay, I can bring my dragon. He sleeps next to me." "Does he snore?" "Only when he's mad." Marissa hid a smile behind her napkin. "He's asking if he can visit," she translated. I looked at her. "Can he?" She hesitated. "Let's start with something smaller, maybe a park day or an afternoon visit." I nodded. "That's fair." Theo didn't seem disappointed. He just went back to eating, humming under his breath, completely content with the world. And it hit me again, how fragile this moment was. Not because it was unstable, but because it was precious. We were 3 people at a table, trying to rebuild something we hadn't even realized was broken. A father meeting his son. A mother watching walls fall that had taken years to build. The check came. I grabbed it instinctively, and Marissa didn't argue. That felt like a small win. Outside the diner, the morning had brightened into something almost cinematic. Birds hopping on the sidewalk, light spilling through trees. Theo reached for both our hands without thinking, one in each, and we walked like that for half a block, a triangle held together by something invisible and undeniable. Then Marissa stopped. "This is our street," she said, nodding toward a small brick building up ahead. "We're just down the block." I looked at Theo. "Well, Captain, guess this is where we dock the ship." He gave a theatrical sigh. "But I didn't finish the treasure map." "I'll draw the next part," I said. "And next time, we'll find the treasure together." He lit up. "Okay, and maybe the treasure is a T-Rex. Only if he believes hard enough," I teased. Marissa knelt to unzip his backpack and pull out a wrinkled piece of paper. "Here," she said, "draw it on this." It was covered in crayon squiggles, mountains, lakes, a big red X in the middle of what I think was a volcano. I took the paper. "Deal!" Theo ran ahead to the stoop, calling over his shoulder. "Come play again soon, Daddy." My heart caught on the word again. I looked at Marissa. She tucked her hair behind her ear. "He's already rewritten the story in his head. That's how kids are." "I want to rewrite it with him," I said. "With you." She gave me a long, thoughtful look. "Let's take it one map at a time." I nodded. "I'll call you tomorrow." She smiled faintly. "Okay." As she walked up the steps and followed Theo inside, I stood there holding a crayon, map to imaginary treasure, and I realized I already had it. The next few days unfolded with a kind of quiet magic I hadn't felt in years. Not the kind of thrill that came from acquisitions or IPOs, something smaller, softer, more alive. I started shifting things. Quietly at first, cancelled a few standing meetings, told my executive assistant to clear my mornings twice a week. No explanations, just make it work. I spent that time at the park near Montrose Beach, waiting, hoping. Marissa didn't promise anything at first. She didn't set a schedule or offer reassurances. But every couple days, like clockwork, I'd see them coming down the path. Theo in his dinosaur backpack, holding a juice box like it was a trophy. Marissa with her cautious, curious eyes. Each visit stitched something deeper into me. Theo started showing me his world in bits and pieces. The mulch pile he called Mount Doom, the bench where the squirrels always fought, the puddle that turned into a lake when it rained, where his pirate crew had once battled an evil octopus made of leaves. And I listened, every word, every nonsensical twist and wild-eyed story, because I was learning his language, one only children speak, but parents can come to understand if they're paying attention. Then one afternoon, after we'd built a makeshift fortress out of sticks and caution tape, Theo turned to me and said, "Do you have a room for me?" I froze. He said it casually, like he was asking for more ketchup. Marissa looked up instantly. "Alert!" I swallowed. "Not yet, but I can make one if you want." He considered that. "With stars on the ceiling?" "Absolutely. And a nightlight that's not scary." "I'll find the least scary one on Earth," I promised. He nodded, satisfied. "Okay." That night I couldn't sleep. I walked through my apartment, clean, sleek, and soulless. Everything curated, nothing lived in, nothing child-sized, nothing real. I stood in the guest room, bare walls, empty shelves, and for the first time since I bought the place, I didn't feel proud of it. I felt lonely. So I got to work. I called a designer I trusted, told her I needed a room made for a 5-year-old boy who liked dinosaurs, space, and possibly being a pirate on weekends. "I need it fast," I said. "How fast?" 3 days. There was silence on the other end, followed by a slow sigh. "It'll cost." "I don't care." And I meant it. For the first time in my life, I didn't care about the cost. I just wanted him to know he belonged. I filled the space with things I never thought I'd buy. A lava lamp shaped like a rocket, a bed frame shaped like a jeep, glow-in-the-dark constellations for the ceiling. I even ordered a plush dragon, just in case his old one ever needed a backup. 3 days later, I sent Marissa a photo. She didn't reply right away. Hours passed. Then finally, Looks amazing. We can come by this weekend. 1 hour. It wasn't much, but it was everything. Saturday arrived like a countdown I'd waited my whole life for. I cleaned twice, adjusted every pillow, replaced the batteries in the nightlight 3 times. When they arrived, Theo ran past me into the apartment without hesitation. Marissa walked in slower, eyes scanning, reading between every line of decor like a novel she wasn't sure she wanted to finish. "Nice place," she said. "It used to be," I replied, "before it felt empty." Theo called from down the hall. "Where is it?" I led him to the door. "Ready?" He nodded dramatically. I opened it. He gasped so loudly I thought he'd choke. Then he darted inside, spinning in circles, touching everything at once. "You got me a dragon and a jeep bed and the stars. Mom, look, the stars." Marissa stepped in slowly, taking it all in, her expression unreadable. "He asked if he had a room here," I said quietly. I didn't want him to wonder. She nodded but didn't speak. Theo jumped onto the bed, bouncing. "This is the best room ever. Can I sleep here?" Marissa froze. I looked at her. The question hung in the air like a tightrope. She took a breath. "Not yet, buddy, but maybe soon, if we all feel ready." His face fell just a little. Then he looked at me. "You promise I can come back?" I knelt beside him. "I promise. This room's yours now. It'll wait for you." He threw his arms around my neck without another word. Marissa watched us, and something in her shifted. Maybe not all at once, but I saw it in her eyes. The tension loosening, the fear melting into something closer to belief. Before they left, Theo asked if he could leave his dragon in the room. "He wants to guard the stars," he explained. My throat tightened. "He can stay." I walked them to the door, and just before they stepped out, Marissa turned. "You're really trying," she said. "I'm not trying," I told her. "I'm here." She looked at me for a long moment, then nodded. "Okay," and with that, they were gone. But the room wasn't empty. It held laughter, trust, the beginnings of something I never knew I needed. A home. Days turned into weeks. The morning light came differently now, warmer, softer, like it had been waiting for me to catch up. Every time my phone buzzed with a message from Marissa or a photo from Theo, my chest tightened in a way that wasn't anxiety or stress, but hope. I was becoming part of their world, piece by piece. One afternoon, I found myself standing at Theo's school gate. The tall glass doors reflected my face, a little older, a little more worn, but the eyes looking back held something new. Nervousness, excitement, both. I'd never done this before, never picked a child up from school, never worried about missing nap times or snack breaks. But here I was, holding a small bouquet of wildflowers Theo had picked for me on his way to class. Marissa was waiting nearby, arms crossed but smiling. "Ready?" I nodded. Inside the school hallway, the noise was overwhelming. Children laughing, teachers calling names, the smell of crayons and cleaning spray mixed together. Then, from around the corner, I saw him. Theo, wearing a backpack 3 sizes too big, grinning wide enough to split his face. "Daddy!" he yelled, running toward me. That word still hit me like lightning. He jumped into my arms like a bundle of pure energy, and I felt the weight of him, solid and real, his small hands clutching, mine tightly as if afraid to let go. We walked out together, and Marissa followed behind. At the park afterward, Theo led the way, dragging me to a new playground with swings that creaked in the breeze. He wanted me to push him high, to fly like the pirates we had pretended to be weeks ago. As I pushed him, I caught Marissa watching. Her eyes were softer now, less guarded. When Theo asked if I would read to him that night, I agreed without hesitation. Later, sitting in the little room I'd made for him, I held a storybook, but it wasn't just the words on the page that mattered. It was the way Theo looked at me, trusting, unafraid. Marissa stood in the doorway watching silently. That night, as I tucked Theo in, he whispered, "I'm glad you're my daddy," and I whispered back, "Me too." That simple exchange felt like a victory. I was no longer just a CEO juggling deadlines. I was a father finding his place. The weeks that followed brought new challenges I hadn't anticipated. Parenting wasn't about deals or contracts. It was about patience, consistency, and showing up, even when everything in me screamed for efficiency and control. One evening, I found myself in the middle of a tantrum, the likes of which no boardroom had ever prepared me for. Theo was inconsolable, tears streaming down his cheeks because I wouldn't let him have the toy he wanted at the store. His tiny fists clenched, voice cracking as he shouted, "But you're my daddy. You should say yes." I felt a stab of guilt. Here was this child, demanding love the only way he knew how. But I also knew that love meant boundaries, something I never thought I'd associate with business or parenting in the same breath. I knelt down to his level, voice steady but soft. "I'm your daddy, Theo. That means I want what's best for you. Sometimes that means saying no." His sobs slowed, confusion and hurt flickering across his face. "You love me even when you say no?" "Yes," I said. "Always." That moment cracked something open inside me. I realized that being a father wasn't about perfection. It was about showing up through the chaos, through the tears, and through the hard lessons. Marissa had warned me that fatherhood wouldn't come with a manual. She was right. But every challenge made me more certain of one thing. I wasn't going anywhere. I was here for the long haul. The first holiday season together was a revelation. I'd always spent Christmas locked in the steel cage of corporate obligations, galas, client dinners, endless handshakes that left me hollow. But this year was different. Marissa and Theo invited me to their family's modest home, a place alive with the warmth of decades of memories, laughter, and chaos. The air smelled of cinnamon and pine, and the soft glow of string lights made everything feel like a gentle promise. Theo insisted on helping me hang ornaments on the tree. His small hands trembled with excitement as he chose the perfect spots, narrating each decoration's story like it was a sacred ritual. At one point, I caught Marissa watching us, her eyes shining with something I couldn't quite name. Acceptance, maybe, or hope. When Theo tugged on my sleeve, pulling me into a sloppy, excited hug, I felt something crack open inside me, a mix of love and fear and joy. This was mine now, not a fleeting business deal or a quarterly report, but real, tangible, and profoundly human. Later, as we sat around the table sharing a simple meal, I realized how much I'd been missing. The quiet, imperfect moments, the messy laughter, the chance to be part of something greater than myself. And as the snow began to fall softly outside, I whispered a promise, to be the father Theo deserved, to stand beside Marissa, and to never let this fragile, beautiful new life slip away. Because sometimes, the richest fortunes aren't counted in dollars, but in the love we choose to nurture. Spring arrived like a soft awakening. The trees burst into bloom, and with them, something inside me seemed to blossom too. I'd never understood before how much growth could come from simply showing up, being present day after day, even when the path was uncertain. Theo's laughter echoed through the park as he chased butterflies, and I watched, heart swelling with a kind of pride I hadn't known I could feel. Not the pride of achievement or status, but the quiet pride of belonging. Marissa and I had settled into a new rhythm, one marked by fragile trust and tentative hope. We weren't perfect, but we were trying. Every conversation, every shared look chipped away at the walls that had once kept us apart. One afternoon, as the sun dipped low, Marissa handed me a folded note. Inside were 2 tickets to a family concert downtown. She smiled, a genuine smile, and said, "Let's make memories That night, as we sat side by side watching Theo's eyes light up at the music, I realized that the real journey wasn't about discovering the past. It was about building a future, together. No boardroom, no million-dollar deals. Just a father, a mother, and their son learning how to love. Months passed, and the bond we forged grew stronger, threaded with moments both extraordinary and mundane. There were scraped knees and whispered bedtime secrets, pancakes made into dragons and spaceships, and quiet afternoons where Theo curled up beside me, trusting me with his dreams. But it wasn't always easy. Old wounds surfaced, uncertainties about the future, fears of rejection, and the lingering ache of lost time. Marissa and I faced those moments head-on, learning to communicate not as adversaries, but as partners, united by our shared love for Theo. One evening, after a particularly long day, Marissa and I sat on the couch while Theo slept peacefully. In his new room, we talked, not about work or schedules, but about hopes, fears, and the fragile hope of a family reunited. I realized then that what I'd feared most, the unknown, was also the greatest gift. Because love, in all its messy, imperfect glory, had brought us together. And no matter what the future held, I knew one thing for certain: I would never stop trying. The day came when Theo took my hand without hesitation, walking beside me as if we'd always belonged together. We sat in the park, sharing ice cream, and watching clouds drift like dreams across the sky. Marissa joined us later, her smile easy, genuine. There was no need for words, only the quiet understanding that we'd come through storms, fears, and doubts to something real. I thought back to that flight, the moment I first comforted Theo's tears without knowing he was mine. How far we'd come from strangers on a plane to a family carving out a new story. As the sun set behind the trees, casting long shadows over the playground, I felt a deep, steady peace settle within me. This was more than I'd ever imagined possible: love, belonging, and the chance to be a father in the truest sense. And in that moment, I knew the journey was just beginning. The sky darkened softly as the day came to a close, and with it, so did our story, at least for now. What began as a chance encounter on a flight became a profound journey of discovery, healing, and love. It's a reminder that sometimes the most unexpected moments can change the course of our lives forever. In the quiet aftermath, I find myself cherishing the small things, the sound of Theo's laughter echoing through the apartment, the gentle touch of Marissa's hand as we navigate this new chapter together, and the warmth of a home finally filled with life. No matter where life takes us next, this story has left an indelible mark on my soul, a testament to the power of forgiveness, the resilience of the human heart, and the transformative magic of fatherhood. So if this story touched you, remember to hold your loved ones a little closer tonight. Life's most precious gifts often come wrapped in the unexpected. Thank you for sharing this journey with me.